Welcome to Season 9 of Live Well, Be Well with me, Sarah Ann Macklin.
Happiness is sort of fleeting and it's something that you catch, because I do think there's a sort of tendency to think, I should be happy all the time. A friend of mine, Ben Miller, said the comedian's worst fear is being laughed at. I think comedy is a good way of dealing with adversity, and it often comes out of, difficult situations. Oh, here we go, we're still going. That's the ending, I thought, but there you go.
The Live Well, Be Well podcast is about exploring our individual elements of mental, physical, and emotional health through sharing stories and expert knowledge to guide you to living well and being well, whatever that means for you. We have a phenomenal series ahead of us. Today is World Mental Health Day, which is a day really close to my heart for a multitude of reasons. Without us sharing conversations, we never engage in topics which can help us and educate us. One pillar which is essential to our well-being is happiness. And who better to speak to about what makes us happy than one of Britain's most loved comedians who has brought happiness to many through comedy and now through his children's novels. Unhappiness, however, is not only increasing around the world, it's rising at unprecedented rates. So I really wanted to kick off this season talking about happiness and how we can create more of it within our world and within ourselves. In this conversation, David and I explore what happiness really means and can we engineer our own happiness. It was such a joy to have David in my home talking about all the things that make him and the world a happier, better place. David?
Hello. I'm kind of shy.
Welcome to my home.
Thank you very much. It's very nice. Not been here before. It's beautiful.
How are you, first of all?
I'm good, thank you.
Yes?
Yes. I'm raring to go.
Okay, good. Wow. You don't know what we're going to ask you today, but
No.
we're going to talk about happiness because
Wonderful.
that's something that I think's really important, and so much of your career has made people very happy.
Well, it's nice you should see it that way. Well, I hope so. That's the aim anyway. That's the aim when you're doing comedy, is to make people happy. I'm sure it has made some people happy. I'm not saying it's made everybody happy, but I hope it's made some people happy.
So I always start off all of my questions with asking the same one, which is what have you changed your mind about the most in the last 10 years?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I became a parent in the last 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't like I was against having children or anything like that, but I suppose that is sort of just such a massive change when you become a parent. And also, I think for me, it's suddenly like everything shifts because everything now becomes about them and their happiness, and all your sort of egotism and selfishness of pursuing your career and thinking that's all that matters suddenly goes out the window. And every decision you now make is about them and their happiness, So every time I get offered a job, it's like, is it going to take me away from my son? Filming abroad, doing a long theatre run, whatever it might be. I just think, even every time anyone asks me to go out for dinner or something like that, I go, I've got my son that night and I don't want to miss, being with him. I mean, I do change my mind about lots of different things. I mean, culture shifts a lot, hasn't it? So you sort of, you were constantly sort of examining the world and your place in it, and whether you're doing good or not, that kind of thing. So constantly thinking about that all the time, because I mean that a lot, it feels like that has accelerated. So I'm 50. Well, I said 50 years old. I'm trying to exaggerate. I'm 51 years old. I'm 51 years old. So I know I don't look it, but but just the last 10 years, I've noticed the biggest cultural shifts, and so it's been sort of exciting keeping up with that, and just it's just a different world all the time, isn't it? It's changing all the time, and it's exciting. Change is exciting.
It is, and if you think back to when you did Little Britain to the comedy now, how's your mindset changed?
Well, the thing is that at the time it was meant, we started making it 20 years ago, you're trying to reflect the world around you, and that was what the show was trying to do. And that's why I think it was successful, because it satirized situations and people and things of the time. So if you were to do it now, it would have to satirize this moment in time. Mm-hmm. So it would be different for sure. But I still think, people really want to laugh, and people can understand, I think, sort of where you're coming from, and if you're coming from a good place and all that kind of thing.
So we're talking about happiness because laughter is actually one of the most important things for how we feel emotionally, physically, mentally. But how has your happiness changed in the last 10 years? Because generally as a society, we've been through a lot that has affected how we feel. So how's your happiness changed in the last 10 years?
Well, I would say the day that my son was born was the happiest day of my life, and every day since then has been happier and happier. And that's what I tell him. It's not entirely true. I mean, obviously, there's been a few days where things have gone wrong, and But I mean,
You're making it sound like having kids
just
is blissful.
generally, I mean, that's the way it's heading. So that has been, for me, it's been completely transformative, and it's the best thing in the world, and just having someone that you love, in such a it's an overwhelming way. You think you know what love is because you've experienced romantic love, but it's very different, and there's sort of no downside to it whatsoever. So it's like your best friend. You just love each other, and you love spending time together, and that's what kids want from you. I know people say, I'm not ready to have children because X, Y, Z, and you think all they want is to spend time with you. So as long as you're together, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. You can be doing something incredibly boring. But I just love, my favorite thing is making him laugh, and having silly in jokes and things like that. And they change over the years, but things like getting the dog and sitting with the dog, hiding my head behind the dog and doing the dog's voice to him and stuff like that, which you always thought was hilarious. And then remember, the thing with kids is they haven't seen all these jokes before because they have just been born. So they think it's amazing. They think it's amazing if you can do a silly voice of a dog or something like that. They think it's hilarious. So we have a lot of fun together, and he gives me happiness all the time. And even just sort of thinking about him or looking at a picture of him or anything like that, all of those things will make me happy.
Yeah. So what does happiness mean to you then?
I remember Philip Larkin in a letter, I think, saying, happiness is sort of fleeting and it's something that you catch, because I do think there's a sort of tendency to think, oh, well, I should be happy all the time. But I mean, it's something, it feels like something that you catch in a moment, doesn't it? And you just realize, oh, I'm really happy. Well, it's a really nice feeling, isn't it? But it's not necessarily all the time. I mean, there's being content is one thing, isn't it?
That's how I would reference happiness. It's like that
contentment. Yes, yeah. I think that to be at sort of peace in some way. But, for me, I'm always sort of striving. So I'm always trying to be creative. I'm always trying to do things. And there's, some stress comes with that. So things frustrate me and stuff, of course. So there's moments of those things. But just generally, I feel in a happy place because I have my son. I'm very lucky. I have a successful career. We get to do the things we want in life. We've met lots of extraordinary people, gone to amazing places. I just feel really lucky, and I feel like you got one life, and I feel like I want to do something with it. Ultimately, all I want to be judged on is, was I a good father? That's all that matters to me. But it is nice also to have some things you can put out there in the world that people like. I mean, I still feel in the grand scheme of things, I'm completely and utterly irrelevant. Because,
really?
Yeah, because,
why?
Well, because on the grand scheme of things, if you really want to go, be an important person, you're going to be like Leonardo da Vinci or something.
You sold 50 million books.
Yes,
but
I mean,
the Roald Dahl.
Well, I don't know. You know what I mean? There's always more to achieve. There's always more. And that's good. I kind of felt when I started achieving some of my ambitions, I thought, oh, well, I just give up now, because I just thought, oh, God, I'd love one day to have a comedy show on BBC Two. That's all I care about. Then that happens and you go, oh, okay, but I have a new ambition now. But I think what really matters ultimately is feeling that your work has a quality and you being happy with it. Because someone somewhere will always say it's crap. Somebody somewhere doesn't like it, and that's fine. That's their opinion. But you just have to feel happy with it. I have to feel, when I'm reading the book with my son or something like that, that I feel like, oh, it's good, and I have to feel that I'm at peace with that. And I did my absolute best at the time. There are also magic moments, like, for example, my first book was called The Boy in the Dress, and it was turned into a musical. Robbie Williams and Guy Chambers wrote the songs, and it was staged at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-upon-Avon. And that was amazing because it was a different experience, because I was sat in the audience and I was watching this show that sort of, I guess, although obviously loads of brilliant people, the actors, the designers, director, everybody had done an incredible job. At the end of the day, it's still like none of it would have existed if I hadn't written the book. 100%. So do you know what I mean? So it felt like a dream. I mean, better than I could ever imagine, but it was like sort of my dream had come to life, and it was the most extraordinary thing, because normally I would be on the stage or something, trying to entertain people, and so you've got all the stresses of that. Whereas I didn't have that. I was just sat in the audience and just it was the most amazing thing. I don't think I've ever felt the same way as I did watching the first preview of that show. And then the second it ended, it was like the whole audience were up giving it a standing ovation, and I was like, oh my God, it was a euphoria that I had never experienced before.
Do you think that's one of your most memorable moments?
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah, because I guess it was just something that was outside of me, do you know what I mean? And it was like, it just couldn't have been any better. You can imagine the Royal Shakespeare Company, the kind of people you're top of your list of great, theatre producers in the world, and so it just couldn't have been any better. The songs were fantastic. Lots of things that I obviously had nothing to do with made it brilliant. So
from your book.
I'm not saying it was all because of me, but it was just like, oh wow, this is just amazing. This was just an idea in my head one day, and then I wrote it down as a book, and then it was like, oh, okay. And then and at that point, I've got no idea it's going to become a musical 10 years later, and then it's going to be so brilliant. So yeah, there are kind of magic moments like that, and I think you've got to savor those.
Oh yeah.
And pinch yourself, and also just always be really grateful. People would kill to have these things.
It's so interesting, because so many times we're not present in that moment. So we're kind of just going, what's the next thing? And actually staying present and acknowledging what you've just achieved in that moment is something that so many of us just forget.
No, I think it's very important. Are you a therapist? Because that was a great thing to say, actually. Yeah. No, I think it's right. Yeah, just be in the moment, and that's it. Yeah. And there's when I'm with my son, and we're just walking along in the park, walking to school with the dogs or something. It's just like just being totally present. That's why things like mobile phones are so terrible for all of this, because you see so many people sort of dragging their kids around and they're on their phone.
You're quite strict with yours, because I can imagine that must really kill creativity.
You have to be, but at the same time, it's this crazy thing now, isn't it? Where even on your phone, there's 10 different ways people can contact you, various sort of Twitter, Instagram, text, email, WhatsApp, all this, and you're sort of just constantly being bombarded with things. And also, you get used to this idea that you have to be constantly stimulated. So this idea that you're just walking in the park and just alone with your thoughts, and you're sort of thinking, oh, I should be processing some information. I need to check what's happening in the news. I need to find out what's happening in Iran, or what's, and all around the world. And so it's quite hard to just sort of sit with your thoughts on your own. Certainly doing creative work, you need to be able to do that, because if you're just distracted the whole time, you're never going to be immersed in your story with your characters, and that's what you really need to do. Is when you're writing a book, you need to sort of visualize everything and then write it down. But if you were on your phone the whole time, the spell is broken. Do you know what I mean? So they're terrible things.
Yeah, but it's a dopamine effect.
Yes, it is.
You pulls you into it.
Yeah, and you're constantly thinking, where's my phone? And I've had those things, when your phone's being repaired or something, and you're not with it for like a morning. And it's like, I don't know.
Anxiety.
I've never taken heroin, but I don't know if it's like that. But there's the incredible anxiety of like, well, where is it? People must have contacted me, and then you get your phone back, and you've had like one text message from like 02 or something, and that's it. And you go, oh. And you know, an Amazon parcel's on its way. But I worry about future generation with that, because it's just such now an important part of life, isn't it? And also kids want their phones younger and younger. And
has yours got one yet?
No, he hasn't. No. But he'll have to have one day. And normally when kids go to secondary school,
they'll have one.
If the parents agree, they tend to get. I'm not saying that's a hard and fast rule, but I'm just saying that tends to be what happens. And then it feels like it's a practical thing, isn't it? Because you want to know where your child is and you want to be able to contact them. But yeah, it's a constant distraction. Did you have that thing on your phone where it says your phone usage is more or less this week? You have that one?
Do you know what I've started doing though? You can pick on the iPhone different focus modes, and right. I do work 10 to 4, and so no one can contact me. It comes through, but I don't see it. because I'm really dyslexic and my focus, my attention is really short. So if somebody's pinging a message at me, I cannot write, I can't focus, I can't get creative. Whereas when I put that on, it can still come through, but it doesn't show on my screen. And so it doesn't draw my focus.
Well, you've got all the answers.
Keeps me like attentive. Otherwise, I just do nothing all day apart from just
And you realise you've just achieved nothing because you've been looking at a picture of Kim Kardashian's ankles on the Mail Online.
Yeah, but you end up going down like
a rabbit hole. Yes,
exactly.
I think now. I think I need to do some research on dinosaurs for my new book. And then after a while, I realise I'm watching an old interview Russell Brand did on loose women, and I'm like, where did I get from dinosaurs to that? And it was like, what did I even start to... that's the other thing about computers, because if you were a writer, Agatha Christie or Ian Fleming or something, you sat there with a typewriter, didn't you? But now you're sat there with a computer and then the portal into everything that's going on in the world. You have to be disciplined not to get lost in those rabbit holes.
I want to tell you about my secret weapon that has become my saviour in recent months. All Plants deliver delicious, healthy, plant-based, chef-made meals to your door, which are ready to heat and eat when you need them. Their dishes contain at least 2 of your 5 a day, and some even 4 of your 5 a day. My personal favourite is the miso and tamari tofu bowl, which also won a Great Taste Award this year. All Plants are also Europe's largest plant-based kitchen, which isn't a surprise when you see their fantastic variety of meals. Head to allplants.com to order and subscribe for your first order, and you can save a whopping 25% off when using the code LWBW. All Plants save me time and have been a huge saviour in making sure I stay healthy even when busy. And I hope they can for you too. Make sure you use the code LWBW for 25% off. Do you know one of my favourite quotes actually from your books, which was The Billionaire Boy, was, and I need to make sure I say this properly, but it's strange how sometimes you can be so happy it goes all the way round to sadness.
Well, that's when you cry, isn't it? When you don't really realise why you're crying when something amazingly happy happens. Like your wedding day or the day your child's born or whatever, and you're sort of, or you see something extraordinary. Even on Britain's Got Talent, you see a group of kids doing a song or something like that, and you start crying, and you don't quite know why that is. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're extraordinary as human beings, are extraordinary creatures, but that actually sounds like I'm actually quite a good writer.
You are a good writer.
Well,
I love how you're not believing this for yourself. Hopefully by the end of this interview I'm going to convince you.
I
You're
work.
a phenomenal
I
writer.
definitely work hard and I do the best I can do, but I don't think it's a good idea to be your own critic. And also, if you're going to listen to what people think about you, you can't have it both ways. Someone's saying you're great, someone's saying you're terrible. What do you want to believe? And it's not a good idea to wander around the world going, no, everyone thinks I'm great. Because you're going to really...
But you also have to have a sense of confidence to be able to put yourself out there, because especially going from comedy to then writing, that's a really big career change. And I've obviously not done what you've done, but I've gone from the fashion industry and kept in there, but then gone much more into the holistic side. And I felt a huge amount of judgment trying to transcend into another thing where people just weren't seeing me as that, and I found that really difficult. How did you find it?
Well, I think there's still resistance. There's still people. There's people who go, he doesn't write his books and they're crap, and I go, you can't have it both ways. Either I do write them and they're crap, or someone else writes them and they're quite good. I mean, me and Matt co-created Little Britain. We wrote all those sketches. We created those characters. So for me, it wasn't a massive creative shift to be able to write a book. There were things I realised I could do in a book that I couldn't do in a comedy sketch. Like you could go on an emotional journey with the characters. The Boy in the Dress is probably my most emotional book, and it's full of moments that are quite sort of tear-jerking and stuff. And I realised there was a whole world that I'd not explored with my imagination before. But yeah, I mean, each book just should be judged on its own merits, really, isn't it? I mean, it's one of these things like, who is qualified to write a book or a children's book. I think the thing about children's books is we read something which we think is kind of simple, like something like The Tiger Who Came to Tea, and we think, oh, well, there's a tiger who came for tea. I mean, I'll do the crocodile that came for dinner, that'd be fun. But I mean, the thing is, there is real genius there in the construction of the story and in the illustrations by Judith Kerr. And so it's one of these things I think everyone thinks they're going to have a go at, but probably, like anything, to do a good one is probably hard, and to come up with something original is hard.
But you had that thought, that first book. Now, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts. We'll have a lot of thoughts. But what was it that you were like, no, I'm actually going to pursue this and write a book about it? Like, what was it that was so strong about that thought?
Well, I just think it wouldn't leave me, as in it was constantly sort of spinning around in my head. It was a bit influenced by a real kid I met, because, when you become well known on television, obviously people write you letters and stuff like that. It's very sweet. And particularly then, because there was no other way of people to contact you, so they'd write. And I got this letter from this boy who dressed up as Emily Howard, the character I played in Little Britain, and he'd gone to school, and it was a sweet little picture, and he wanted an autograph or something. And then we were doing the show in Manchester, and he was there with his mum, and said, oh, I sent you a letter, do you remember? And actually, because it was a memorable letter, I did remember. Obviously, you can't remember every single communication, but this one I did. And I thought, oh, he's quite cool. And I know he was only dressing up as a comedy character, but I thought, oh, it was quite cool. He's going to school dressed as a girl. And this was like, 18 years ago or something. And I thought, oh, what if he just really wanted to dress as a girl and went, and how would his friends react? How would his family react? How would his teachers react? All that kind of thing. And I thought, I just need to write this now, because it keeps spinning around my head. And I think it's a book about difference. It's a book of celebrating difference. And I felt like it was something I wanted to write, something that was personal to me as well. And I was just in the Lego store in London with my son recently, and a trans person came up to me, like late teens or something, maybe 19 or 20 or something like that, and said, oh, I read your book, when I was younger, and it really, really helped me come to terms with my identity. I was so sort of overcome with that, because you don't know what people are thinking and feeling about your work, and you can't expect everyone to think and feel the same way. Someone thinks it's great, someone thinks it's terrible, but the fact that it had helped somebody was really, really powerful, and I was very proud. And you don't know what people are going to say when they come up to you, but that was a big moment, and I thought, okay, so it's done some good, so I'm pleased. I mean, that was the aim of the book, and it's interesting how that book came out in 2008, so 14 years ago. So obviously a lot has happened since then around this issue of gender identity and stuff. And it's great, isn't it? The world has changed, and the world is changing, and there's more acceptance, and that's only a wonderful thing.
But how do you deal with? I think you have to have such a strong sense of self to be able to put yourself out there and have a lot of people talk quite openly to your face about things that you don't necessarily agree with, and that adversity that so many young adults face. How did you deal with that? Because you even titled your memoir Camp David, and so it was very at the forefront of just going to be myself, and I don't really care what you're going to say about me.
Well,
but how do you? I mean, that's still such a admiration thing to do. Not many people have the strength to do that.
Well, a friend of mine, Ben Miller, said the comedian's worst fear is being laughed at. And he says comedy is a way of controlling people's laughter at you. So when I was a kid at school, I was teased and things for being camp, and it was a time when, an insult in a school playground was being gay. It was like, and I went to all boys school, so it was like, you're gay, and that was like the worst thing you could be called. Which is very sad, isn't it, really? Because of course there were gay kids at the school, but they obviously couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't say anything because they would have had such a tough time. I mean, I hope things are different now. I'm not, privy to what's going on in every playground in the country, but I pray that things are different. And so me trying to be funny, and part of being camp is playing up to it, you see, because I thought, okay, you've given me this label, and I am naturally, I always felt naturally quite sort of camp in some ways, or feminine in some ways, whatever. And so I sort of played up to it, and so then it was a way of dealing with it, I think, and then controlling it in a way, you know what I mean? And sometimes people do that kind of thing, where the sort of badge they've been given with with pride. I think comedy is a good way of dealing with adversity, I think, and it often comes out of, difficult situations, and it's a way sometimes, you hear funny stories about people being shouted at in the street and shouting something back, like gay friends of mine said, sometimes somebody would shout something horrible, oh, you queer or something like that over the street, and then they go, that's how I started, and things like that. Just actually camp humor has always been a great weapon. I don't know if you've ever read The Naked Civil Servant by Quentin Crisp. You're a bit young, but Quentin Crisp was a very flamboyant homosexual who was born probably around the turn of the century, like 1900 something, and he wrote a book called The Naked Civil Servant, a memoir, and it turned into a film. John Hurt played him, and he just had a wonderful way of sort of dealing with people who were like cruel to him about that. He would, some boy would go, there's a bit in the film where some boy goes, oh, are you queer or something? The guy goes, how dare you, I'm one of the stately homos of Britain or something like that, just that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I've always felt humour is quite a good way of dealing with any of that adversity. But I also think you've got to have quite thick skin if you're putting yourself in the public arena. I mean, just imagine being a politician. Just imagine being Liz Truss today or something like that. I mean, you must have to have really thick skin, because, I mean, people do not hold back with politicians, do they?
They can't be a comedian.
Boris Johnson was, but Liz Truss doesn't seemingly be playing for laughs in quite the same way. You just have to have a thick skin, and you just can't be worried by every single bit of criticism, because otherwise you're going to get nowhere. But I remember I did a play with this brilliant director called Michael Grandage, who's actually just directed this movie with Harry Styles. It's called My Policeman, and he's a great theatre director, and he's directed some films, and he's a hugely talented guy. And I did Midsummer Night's Dream with him, with Sheridan Smith. And he said this great thing, I thought it was great. He goes, person sat in CE9 having a life-change experience, watching the best night of theatre in their life. Person sat in E10 bored out of their brain. And I just thought it was a great way of looking at it, wasn't it? Because when you do a theatre show, and we'd come out at the end, and our applause, and you would see some people, on their feet, like, this is amazing, and other people like this, and so you haven't pleased everybody, and you can't worry about it because you can't please everybody. And it was just a good way of, because you were really trying to win them over. And you got this, you're doing a theatre show, you got 2.5 hours, right? Win everyone over. I just think, God, I want to get every one of you laughing, having the best time of your life. But there's still some people who just didn't like it. You know what I mean?
That is true.
And they can't worry about it. You just can't worry about it. You can't please everybody. And I don't know if you have conversations with people like, like one of my favourite comedians is Will Ferrell. But, I remember a friend of mine said, oh, you like Will Ferrell? I don't find Will Ferrell. I was thinking, for me, it's absolutely incomprehensible that someone would not find Will Ferrell funny. Because to me, he's like the funniest person on the planet. But there's someone somewhere who doesn't think he's funny. But is Will Ferrell worried about it? I very much doubt it. And he shouldn't be, should he? And you just can't. I just think you just got to be able to deal with all that and let it sort of wash over you. Because it's noise. It's just noise, isn't it, really? And that's fine. And the thing now is that we're connected all the time, if we want to be, to people who have a criticism about us, whether they want to tell us on social media or something. But, it's just if you start reading it, it's going to kind of make you go nuts, isn't it? But it's not necessarily it's not exactly a new thing. Have you ever heard of a comedian called Tony Hancock?
Yes.
So he was one of the most famous comedians in the country in like the 50s and 60s, and he is like utter genius. And I met the writers who wrote Hancock, Galton and Simpson, and they said that Tony Hancock got a letter through the post saying, I don't like you, no one in my house likes you, and no one on my streets like you. Just a complete stranger at the height of his fame. And remember, this was a time when if you were on television, 20 million people would be watching you, and he was like a kind of folk hero. You know what I mean? Famous beyond the way anyone is famous. Maybe like Peter Kay or Billy Connolly or Victoria Wood, something like that. But even more than that in a way, because it was a smaller culture. It was less to see. And he brought the letter in, and they ended up writing a show about it. But there's always someone somewhere who wants to tell you that they don't like what you do, and you can't worry about it.
You can't. And do you know what I think? That's held you in very good stead for all of your charity work. Because when you swam the Channel, the English Channel, and also the 8 days of the Thames, which was phenomenal, the mental endurance you need to keep going for 11 hours where you have nothing else but your own voices in your head is really tough. First of all, why did you do that?
Yeah, I think it's as much a mental challenge as a physical challenge, doing an endurance thing, yeah. Because of course you're cold, you're tired, your brain is going to say, why don't you just get out and this will all be over? But of course...
Because remember your coach did, when you did the Portsmouth to the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
And you were like, I'm going to keep going.
Well, I have a layer of fat on me, and he didn't. He was an Olympic pentathlete, and so he was incredibly fit, but he had no fat on him. So I wouldn't advise you doing swimming the Channel because actually people who are really good at it tend to be a little bit heavier.
Our next partner has a product I and my best friend use literally every day. Although I always advocate food first, sometimes when our diet falls short due to stress or a lack of time, we need that extra support, and that's what I needed come September. I started taking AG1 by Athletic Greens because, like most people, I struggle to maintain a healthy, balanced diet when things are busy. In these times, I always like to have something as an insurance policy. So what is this stuff? Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1 in water every day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced ingredients, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and even aging. There is no need for a million different pills and supplements now to look after your health. I've personally been using AG1 for the last 4 weeks. I have it every morning before my morning coffee. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. That's 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. That's mad. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/LWBW. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/LWBW to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
So yeah, the challenge is in the mind. But I was on a trip to Ethiopia, a comic relief trip with Matt. Little Britain had just started, and we were starting to do things for comic relief, like we did a special episode DVD, and they wanted to show us the work they were doing because they wanted us to be able to talk with some confidence about what they were up to, because it's all very well to go, oh yeah, the money's helping some people thousands of miles away, but if you've seen it with your own eyes, you've got stories to tell. And so I was there, and then the head of comic relief, Kevin Kyle, said, is there anything sporty you've ever fancied doing? And I went, I like swimming. I've always fancied swimming the Channel. He went, you can do it next year for sport relief. And I was like, what? And I thought he'd forget about it. And then we got back to London, and he said, right, I've set you up a meeting with the Channel Swimming Association president. I was like, right. And I thought, and then they said, are we going to meet the trainer? I was like, okay. And then they had this thing. They said, we've got to send you for a heart test because if you've got any kind of heart defect, we can't make you do it because there's a chance you'd have a heart attack. Like when sometimes people have, you don't know, and they're running around a football pitch and they have a heart attack. And I was praying there was something wrong with me. I was praying there was some heart defect that I had that would take me out of it, but I didn't. And then it all just started sort of happening. And then I was on this journey, and then I was, embedded in it, and I really wanted to do it. But the other thing that was happening was we were touring the Little Britain stage show at the time. And, I've never been one for staying up late, drinking, taking drugs or anything like that. Because some people, they go on tour and it's like, way, they're going to be up till dawn. I don't know, doing whatever. But I'd be like, come back, have a peppermint tea and go to bed. So we had most of the days free. And so if they wanted me to go and spend 4 hours in a swimming pool or swim in the North Sea when I was, up north somewhere, I could do it. So it was great. So it kind of kept me on a very even keel throughout the whole tour. And it's quite a weird thing touring because you're away from home, you're away from, you're with some of your friends, but you're away from other friends and family. And, it's just, when you get, it does something to your head as well. We're playing arenas and there's 10,000 people, having a great time. And so it was really good having that other focus.
How long did you swim every day?
Well, it kind of built up, and some of the training swims were 8 hours. So I'd get in Dover, I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, drive to Dover Harbour, swim up and down for 8 hours. I mean, it's so unbelievably kind of boring. I don't know, you sort of tread water and have like a little sugary, the squirty sort of things, just some glucose or something, and you just keep going to 5 o'clock, and then you drive home.
But
and that's the
How
whole
do you keep
day.
your mental state focused and not go quite mad?
You just have to make lists of things that you like, things that make you happy. So for me, it would be like Beatles albums with all the songs, try and remember the songs and work my way through, an album. Do I know the lyrics to all these songs on Revolver or something like that? Okay, first track's Taxman. Okay, let's start there and try and see if I can, so you're trying to pass the time. Trying to think of James Bond movies. I'm quite obsessed with James Bond movies, and it's like, let's think of, the pre-credit sequence of each one, what happens in each one. Can you remember what happened? That sort of stuff, just to pass the time, singing songs in your head and stuff. But saying that, being in the sea, it never gets boring exactly, because there's always something around, and you're suddenly little patches of cold water, or you see things floating, or, you're looking around you the whole time. But I do like swimming. Well, I used to like swimming.
Do you still like it now? Do you
Yeah,
have
I mean,
any
I like
PTSD
swimming.
from it?
I like swimming, if I see the sea or going, or a lake or something, I always kind of want to get in it. Yeah, so I do have that desire, and I'm quite good in the water. I'm amphibious, so I'm my body works quite well in the water because I'm tall and got big hands and big feet. So it's kind of I'm sort of built for it.
It's amazing for your mental health, swimming in the sea.
Yeah, I think cold water's good because you feel a kind of euphoria when you get out, actually.
Do you still swim?
Yeah, all the time.
Most mornings?
No, not every day, but I mean, certainly when I get the opportunity to, I do. Yeah, I like swimming in the pool, but I love swimming in the sea and wherever I am. I mean, my dream is actually to go to the Arctic.
Is that your next challenge?
Well, I don't know.
Can we announce it now?
No, because I think it costs so much money to get to the Arctic that I'm not sure it's that sensible. But when you see like frozen planets and you see the wildlife there, and I would love to get in, amongst the icebergs and swim, and see some of the wildlife there. I'm probably a bit dangerous.
Amazing.
There's killer whales and things that might drag you down and drown you. But I love any sort of body of water to swim in. So yeah, so I do genuinely love it, and I'm glad I did those things. But I don't think I'm going to do it.
What was your most memorable moment? I remember you saving a disabled drowning dog down the Thames.
That was along the Thames. I tell you, the most memorable bit was when I got to the other side in France. My mum gets seasickness, but she'd come on a boat to follow my challenge. But obviously, I'm going slowly, a couple of miles an hour. That's all. It's as fast as you can swim. So the boat's going very slowly, and so when the boat's going slowly, there's kind of more weight. You get more of a sense of movement. And when I got to the other end, I saw my dad on the deck of the boat, but I didn't see my mum. Well, that's strange. And then we got back to dry land, and she'd been on this boat for 12 hours or something. And I said, "Oh, I didn't see you at the end. What was that?" And she said, "Oh, I was below deck. I've been throwing up for the last 12 hours." And I said, "Oh, you shouldn't have come." She went, "I wouldn't have missed it for the world." Even though she was throwing up and didn't see anything. But she wanted to be there for me, So that was probably the best thing. Because I think at the end of the day, making your parents proud, if you're lucky enough to have, your parents are around, you have a good relationship with your parents, it's one of those things, isn't it? That you want more than anything.
Because your mum spoke in that documentary, actually, of you swimming at the Channel, and she said that you're a real perfectionist and you really like to put your mind to things and you're so determined. But do you see yourself as a perfectionist?
Well, I think a lot of people say they're perfectionists, don't they? And you wonder whether they actually are because their work isn't perfect. I think I'm very driven. I think I'm definitely very driven, and I want things to be right. Yeah, so to some extent, yeah. I mean, saying that, I don't think the work I've created is perfect, so that's sort of a different thing, isn't it? But I certainly try my hardest, and I'm definitely driven.
Yeah.
And I notice that because I find it confusing when I meet people who are not driven at all. I find it a bit strange because I think, really, you just want to lay in bed and not want to do anything? You don't want to just do something or use your time in some way? I find it very strange when people are really complacent about the time they have on the planet.
But do you think that then impacts your performance or happiness in any way?
Well, personally, I think you need something. I would be unhappy if I woke up on a day with nothing to do. That's my idea of unhappiness. So for me, a happy day is I've got to get up and I've got to achieve things. I've got to do things. And actually, I know people who, periods in their life, have been very unhappy. And one of the things they often do is they stay up all night and then they sleep in all day because they want to kind of avoid the world, don't they? They want to avoid life. But for me, it's like early night, if you can, get up, do stuff and get things done. I mean, I love it. And so purpose, I think, is really important. And you can have, it doesn't have to be work, does it? I mean, I've been looking after your kid or whatever, keeping a home, whatever, cooking a meal, whatever, something, working for a charity. But with no purpose whatsoever, I think people tend to really unravel a bit. And I think that's one of the worst things, isn't it, of like not having a purpose. So I couldn't imagine not having work to do, for example.
What would you say your purpose is? Because, I mean, your career has spanned from so many different dimensions. So you've given £1 million of raising money for sports relief and charity. You know, you're a phenomenal author to many children and children's books. You're a comedian. You're a Britain's Got Talent judge. I mean, what for you would you say, because it's just so vast in what you've done, is something that's really purposeful to you? What's your purpose, would you say?
Well, there's sort of different purposes across those spectrum of things, but I suppose ultimately it's to make other people happy is a lovely thing. And it's a wonderful thing that happens when you become well known, is that people are just happy to meet you. And you get invited to go and visit, you know, kids who are not well or to go into a hospital or wherever, school, and people are just happy you're there. You walk in and they're happy, and it's the weirdest thing because it's just me. I don't know what you're so excited about, but you know, it's a wonderful thing that the average person doesn't kind of get to do because they create that excitement, you know, of a surprise visit or something is incredible. But ultimately, I just want to make people happy. I don't want to make kids. I mean, with the kids' books, I feel like there is probably a bigger mission, which is to try and get kids to read more. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying I'm teaching them how to read, but I'm just saying to get them to read for pleasure in a world where there's so many distractions for them. And so I feel like getting kids to read for pleasure and giving them a love of books. And I actually love trying to reach the kids who are reluctant readers. That
was me when I was younger.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm me to some extent. And I love go into schools and I say, who likes books? Who thinks books are boring? And it's boys, boo. Why do you think they're boring? There's just one boy where there's not enough killings. It's only about 10 or something. What about killings? And so I sort of thought, these are the ones you need to reach, you know? And you'll meet like a kid who's 10 who's read every Harry Potter book, and you'll meet a kid who's 12 who's never read a book. So for me, the kid who's 12, if you're not going to get them now, they're going to lose out everything. So I hope that the books are reaching people that are reluctant readers, and that's certainly what I'm told from parents and things.
You have sold 50 million copies. So you're definitely reaching a lot.
It seems that way, yeah. But also you want there to be a message that people take away from it. Like The Boy in the Dress is a bit different, you know. Yeah. So I used to go into schools and start talking about the book, and I'll say it's about a boy who comes to school dressed as a girl, and sometimes the kids would giggle, you know, at the idea of that. But it was good. But I would tell them, you know, it's something to be celebrated, to be different. If you feel different, that's a wonderful thing. You should never be shy of that, you know. And I think those sort of messages are important because kids are often feel they have to conform in a situation like a school, you know. I remember talking to Tom Ford, a guy interviewed him for something at GQ, and he said, so he actually says before you go to school, you're kind of most yourself. Because you if you want to go and dress up in all your mother's clothes or do whatever, once you start socializing with other kids, that's when you start to become aware of like societal norms. And I thought that was quite an interesting way of looking at it, how free some kids feel. And then you go to school, you suddenly have to, you don't want to transcend the rules that have been set by the kids, do you? Often you think, oh, I better dress this way and act this way, but, you know, what a wonderful thing. How boring would the world be if we were all the same? I mean, I love when people are different. And, you know, sometimes you go out and you see, like, some cool kind of club kids, you know, like, dressed up in extraordinary, you know, they want to be the next Lee Bowery or something, and they're dressed up in this way. And I always make a point of going, I say, you're brilliant, you're fantastic, no, never, ever stop dressing like this. You make the world a better place. Because it's great when you see people who are different, isn't it? It's a wonderful thing. It's like, wow, brilliant. Different cultures and all these kind of things. So to me, it's something that really needs to be celebrated. And if kids feel different in some way, I mean, we all feel different in some way or another, don't we? Mm-hmm. Maybe more people, some more than others. But what an awful thing to feel you've got to hide it, and what a great thing to feel you can express it.
And you must be able to do that quite closely with your 9-year-old now, because you have a child going through that transition, nearing secondary school in a few years. How do you inspire him to stay himself and not change?
Well, I just try and give him as much sort of positive energy feedback as I possibly can. But he's quite outspoken, he's funny, he's chatty, and I don't feel he, is constrained by sort of rules or anything particular. I mean, as in, I don't feel like he's trying to suppress anything about himself to sort of please others. He just is his own character, and it's wonderful to see. And you want to create an environment where they're as happy and confident as possible, and they can share any idea with you. No question is a silly question. Nothing they want to wear is silly. Nothing they want to do.
Okay, so do you have a formula for writing children's books? Because you do take every kid on a journey.
Well, I think that the biggest thing you need to do in a children's book is empower the child. So they often say the best thing in a children's book is kill off the parents in the first chapter, which, Harry Potter does, isn't it? I mean, Harry Potter's parents. And it allows the kid to go on an adventure. So I think that is very important, to somehow empower them. And the second thing is to try and see the world through a child's eyes. Try and think about how you felt about the world when you were a kid. Because when you're a kid, things feel hyper real. And I mean by that is that there's a kind of, you're half in the real world and you're half in a fantasy world when you're a little kid. And me and my sister, we used to look at an empty house on the road where we lived, and we'd think, oh, there's a ghost there. And then one of us would say, we saw the curtains move. And we obviously they hadn't, and we just cycled away, convinced that we'd seen a ghost. And so I think, and you make up stories about teachers. We had this teacher at our school who had these he wore these shoes with big, almost like kind of hobnail kind of fronts to them, and we decided that he had to wear those shoes because he had no toes, and then it became he doesn't have no toes, he's got special robot toes and stuff like that. I mean, just utterly ridiculous. But we were letting our imaginations run riot. So I kind of think you've got to try and see the world through a child's eyes, and children want to read a story. Most of the time, if not all the time, they want to see the child at the centre of that story, being free of the kind of things that most children have to, have to be back from school at a certain time, of this, that, and the other. It feels like you've got to kind of set them free on an adventure. And that's quite nice. I mean, this book's set in the 60s, so it's like pre-mobile phones, pre-internet, all that kind of thing. So it feels like, you can explore a lot more. And people often say that with things like Enid Blyton and the Famous Five and stuff. It's like the kids were allowed to run riot on this sort of island and stuff, and didn't have to be back for a certain time. The children in Narnia, they're all been evacuated, haven't they? So they're going to go and live in this house, and so their parents aren't around, and so they can disappear off into a magical world, and no one notices that they're gone. I think it's that kind of thing.
Do you feel quite free when you're writing? Because as you're talking about it, I'm just imagining daydreaming, and I was just thinking, I don't know when the last time I daydreamed. It's quite a terrifying thought. Just as you were talking about imagination, and then I was thinking about myself as a child, I don't have those daydreaming moments anymore, but I can imagine trying to write these, you have to get into that state.
Yeah, you are daydreaming, and the great thing is that the only limit is your imagination with a book. Because I came from writing for television, and in television you can write things like, we're going to have a scene at a football match or something, and they'll just go, well, we can't do that because you're going to need 50,000 extras, and it's going to cost too much money, and you can't film on a football pitch, blah blah blah. And it's like, we can't film in Buckingham Palace, we can't go into space. But of course in a book you can do anything you want. You can be in the future, you can be in the past, you can, the only limit is your imagination. And also I think children's books are generally more imaginative than books for grown-ups, because I think children are more receptive to it. But if you think about things like the Harry Potter world or Narnia world or Tolkien's world or something, they're all in a fantastical world, aren't they? And anything can happen in those worlds, and that's thrilling.
What's your favourite character? Because that's something that my niece and nephew have asked to ask you personally.
Well, I do think it's important to have a good villain. And when you've got a good villain, the story really takes off. And something I learnt from Roald Dahl is try and make the villains funny as well, because then you like spending time with them. You think about Miss Trunchbull and Matilda.
Oh, he's great.
A great character. And also, you know, the way he plays it, she's violent towards the children, but she picks up a girl by her pigtails, spins around and throws her out the window, which is a funny and surreal image. If she punched children in the face, it would not be funny, it would just be horrific. But somehow, even though in real life, if someone threw someone around by pigtails, it would be horrific, in the imagination of Roald Dahl and the illustrations by Quentin Blake, it's funny. I feel like have good villains, because villains make the story happen, and if you can, make them funny to some extent. So one of my favourite characters I created is Bert from Rat Burger, he basically sells rat burgers outside of school, but he pretends they're not rats, and he like wants to catch rats, and this girl in the story, Zoe, who's got a pet rat, and he wants to kill it and put it in a burger, and it's just he's I hope he's as my idea for him is that he's as scary as he is funny. And I feel like that's what I really aim to do in the books, you know, is to make sure that there's great larger than life characters that even if they're really evil, they're funny too. Because if you just have a character that's evil with no humor at all, it feels a bit, I mean, obviously people do it brilliantly, Voldemort or Darth Vader, you know, there's no laughs with them, but
you know what it does remind me of? You know when you see pantomime and you have a villain,
yeah, and you like to boo them.
It's really funny.
Yeah, it's funny, but also they are a bit horrible as well.
Yeah.
I mean, as a young child, you'd be scared. So yeah, villains are important as well, I'd say, in your plot, because the hero just can only react to what the villain's doing.
I do know that my nephew said he really wants you to make a book that's going to make him really scared.
Oh, but then I write
He's
scary.
only 9.
Okay, I write what I hope are scary books, and they say, "Oh," kids say, "Oh, I read your book, Demon Dentist." I say, "Oh, did you find it scary?" And they go, "Nope." Like that. I don't know if they just didn't or they don't want to admit it. But I was going, "Oh, it was meant to be scary." Nope, like that. But I suppose kids don't like to admit. Yeah, they are best critics, but I think kids don't like to admit they were scared often, do they?
So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. What's one ambition you're yet to fulfill, but you want to?
I'd love there to be a big cinema movie of one of my books. That would be exciting. Well, I don't mind. I mean, anyone they want, but I just want Steven Spielberg to call and say, "Hey, I read your book. I want to make it into a movie." So I don't mind which one. Don't mind which one, Mr. Spielberg, but something like that. I mean, that would be amazing, because that kind of brings your story to a whole new audience, and also great films live forever, don't they? In a way, so.
They are being made, those TV programs. So I don't think that's that
No, I love the TV. I'm not, I love it, but it would just be really exciting. Cinema, seeing something on the big screen, if there's a great filmmaker that does it, it'd just be really, really exciting,
And what's one thing that we don't know about you but would surprise us?
Oh dear. Hang on. Okay, I'm a big fan of Kanye West.
Are you?
You wouldn't necessarily think I would be the average Kanye West fan as a 51-year-old man, but I love Kanye West. I'm quite obsessed with Kanye West music. And I did once meet Kanye West.
And did you tell him?
Well, he was kind of in his own world a bit. It's quite a name-droppery story, but I was on holiday with Elton John, and in Hawaii, and we were having dinner, and he said, "Do you want to come? I'm just about to go and lay down a track with Kanye." Oh yeah, I'd love to come. And he was making my beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy at the time, Kanye. So it was like his 4th album, and Elton came on to do all of the lights, and he just did this sort of piano part and sung a bit. And Elton said, "Kanye, how's the album going?" And Kanye went, we're like taking music to another level. This is going to be like one of the greatest albums ever made." And I went, "Oh, good for you." That was my only interaction with him, really, because he just sort of looked at us a bit like we were just there, he wanted us to talk to Elton, but yeah. So I'm a big Kanye West fan. Are you surprised?
No, well, he's one of the greats.
Yeah, he's one of the greats. There you go.
He's literally one of the greats. What's one of your biggest regrets?
God. Well, I have so many, it's hard to say, but I think it's falling out with people is a horrible thing. So I think every time you fall out with someone, whoever they are, I hate that distance that you have with people who were once friends or partners or whatever. I hate that. So that's definitely regrets, And sometimes it's hard, isn't it? If you let time pass, and you sometimes never get those relationships back to what they were. So I think that's
a good one.
That's a regret.
And what's the 3 things that make you happy?
Chocolate. That's the main one.
I'm with you on that.
No, my son is the thing that makes me happy. He's the person that makes me happier than anything. So just doing anything with him is great, you know, and seeing him happy. It's very infectious when you're with, you know, a kid is happy. And so, yeah, he makes me happy. My friends make me happy. My mum makes me happy. My dogs make me very happy because it's very uncomplicated, isn't it? So even you had a really bad day and you get home and your dogs are pleased to see you, it's like, oh, somebody loves me. So they make me happy too. But also when I've written a book and I'm finally handed the finished product, that makes me very happy too, because I feel a sense of pride. Now, I'm not saying it's the same as giving birth. It's not. But it does feel a bit like something that sort of was in you and now is outside of you. I mean, I'm not like, I don't know what it's like to give birth. I'm sure it's very difficult, very hard. But it's just an amazing feeling. It feels like you're cradling. The first time you see it, it's like you're cradling a little baby. So when I get the first copy of the book, it's really exciting. And then I always give the first copy to my son, which is lovely as well. But it's a very exciting thing because TV's different. You make it and it doesn't exist really in a physical form. Maybe a DVD, but DVDs are not beautiful objects like books, are they? Whereas a book can be a beautiful object. I mean, for reasons not to do with me, the way it's illustrated, the way it's designed. But I think there is an amazing sort of feeling of pride and excitement when I see it as a physical thing.
And what inspires you today?
Meeting you and seeing how wonderful you are in every way. And
I feel like we should finish it with that one.
Just hearing about your niece and nephew, and that they like, you know, people I've never met who are eager to read my new book. I mean, that's exciting as well. And I came from doing a radio interview where I had to surprise a little girl called Roxy who'd come up from Devon, and she didn't know she was going to meet me, and it was just so sweet. And it's nice being able to do nice things for people as well. Like, you know, when you have some success. And I said, "What do you want to do?" And she said, "I really want to go to Harry Potter World." You know, I said, "Well, is there anything you want to do while you're in London?" "I want to go to Harry Potter World." I was like, "Well, it's in Leavesden. It's quite a way back." But, and then I immediately got on to, like, the publisher said, "Look, let's sort out the tickets. I want to pay. I want to send her and her family to Harry Potter World today." And just being able to do things like that is really nice, you know? So those kind of things really give me pleasure.
That's so lovely.
Well, I feel like, you know, it's a wonderful thing, you know, and I meet kids who are ill and stuff like that, and just trying to do nice things for them is lovely, you know?
Giving back is such a powerful thing.
It is, and
someone who owns a charity,
it's so pleasurable.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that I find it odd when people don't, because I think it's actually a really nice feeling. And it's a much better feeling than spending money in a stupid way. You know, and I hear about, I won't mention them, but I heard about some guy who was like a billionaire type guy, and on New Year's Day, they said, he would stay at that place in Barbados, Sandy Lane, and he'd always, on New Year's Day, he'd always spray the beach with champagne. And I just thought, well, why would you do that? Why not just say that, whatever? And it was probably like really expensive champagne. It's just like, can give it to like Great Ormond Street Hospital or something like that. Just do something meaningful. That's going to give you a much better feeling than this stupid showing off thing you're doing. So, it is a good feeling. Making other people happy is a lovely feeling. I mean, in a way, and seeing that is probably better than making yourself happy. And actually, the things you do to try and make yourself happy, you think, oh, I'm just going to buy a new pair of shoes or do this. It's like, yeah. But when you do something for someone else, it's a much greater feeling.
So true. I mean, genuinely, the scientific research shows doing something for someone else benefits your own happiness greater.
That's why I
doing
did this
something for
podcast
yourself.
for you see, to make you happy.
Thank you. Thank you, Val.
Thank you very much. You're a wonderful interviewer. That was lovely.
What's the funniest thing you've ever heard?
Oh, here we go. We're still going. That was a lovely ending, I thought, but there you go.
I've got two more questions. What's the funniest thing you've ever heard, and what's the best joke? You want to make people laugh, so I need to hear this.
Oh, God. I mean, a joke that I could share that's like appropriate. No, I don't know. This is a big risk because I like some kind of quite, you know, obviously I'm a comedian. Groucho Marx said that for the average person, an old lady in a wheelchair careering down a hill was funny. He said for a comedian, it needs to be a real old lady. I thought it was quite a good one because obviously comedians sometimes have dark senses of humour. A joke.
I've just got 99 in my head.
Okay, well, 99 is brilliant, isn't it? But I don't know. There are some jokes that are just so fantastically, brilliantly written that you think you're never going to do better than that. There's a joke in the Hancock episode where he says, Tony Hancock's where he goes, does the name Magna Carta mean nothing to you? Did she die in vain? Which I think is a great joke. There's also a great joke in Till Death Do Us Part where, again, it's a very old sitcom. You probably don't know about it, but it was this character called Alf Garnett and his wife, and they're telling the story of it was a Christmas episode telling the story of Jesus, and they were saying, oh, Joseph and Mary knocked on the inn door, but the inn was full, and then the wife goes, well, it was Christmas, everywhere's busy at Christmas. But I just think that is an amazing joke. So those kind of jokes. There's also a brilliant joke, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore sketch, where Dudley Moore hops in and he wants to play Tarzan, and he's like a one-legged person who wants to play Tarzan. I mean, I actually probably can do this sketch now, but it is a funny sketch. It's made in the 60s. And he goes, well, Tarzan is generally a biped. You're a uniped. And he goes, I've got nothing against your left leg. The problem is neither of you. Which is again, you think that's a perfect joke. So those kind of perfect jokes, I like. There's also an amazing joke in Absolutely Fabulous where Adina's talking to Jennifer Saunders is talking to her mum, played by June Whitfield. And she says, inside, she's trying to lose weight or something. She goes, inside, there's a thin person just trying to get out. And then her mum goes, just the one, dear. Again, it's like brilliant. So those kind of jokes where you just go, you just think that's perfection, comic perfection. Mm. So those are the sort of jokes I would, you think, funny, I could think of anything that good.
I mean, you did.
I will tell you the rude joke when we're not doing the
okay, great.
this because it might be divisive.
Okay, well, your final question, which I ask all my guests, David, which please answer honestly, is what does live well, be well mean to you?
I guess it means sort of try and do good, try and be a good person and live a good life, and it's gonna make you happy, and it's gonna. You're going to have a better life in that way, And it's trying to find a balance of all these things, isn't it? And I find it hard because I get invited to every school in the country, can't go to every one, but I can go to some, and it's feeling to me it's a balance of things. If I've got to write my books, I can't, if I went to schools every day for the next 5 years, kids wouldn't want to see me anymore because I wouldn't have written any books. So it's just kind of getting a balance between all these things. And it's hard to get this balance, but the good thing is my son sort of forces me to stop work because I want to be with him and I want to spend time with him. And I hate the idea I'm just sort of sat there on a computer when I'm with him. So it's that balance, I think, is quite hard to come by. But your son helps you with that. I love how much you speak about your son. I think it's he's the center of my world, and everything, all that matters is him and his happiness.
But that's such a lovely thing. It's such a beautiful thing, and I think a great reminder of actually the importance of family and friends and connection and your loved ones. So many of us can get disconnected when we get pulled into work.
Yeah.
Having that around us.
Yeah, and also children just bring in just a wonderful energy, and they're so innocent, you see. So they
a playful energy.
Yeah, and just the way they look at the world, and just and also you can do silly jokes every day. Every morning we used to have a joke where I'd put on the James Bond theme, and then I'd steal his underpants. So when he was getting dressed for school, and then run around the kitchen, and he'd have to try and get the underpants on my head. I mean, and you think that might be funny like once. Well, we did it like 100 times. I mean, it never stopped going funny. Brilliant. So it just for me is like always having time to laugh and play. And I feel very lucky in the things I do that I get to be playful. As an actor, it's almost you remain as a child really because you get to play the whole time. And as a writer, you're getting to create. So again, it's just being playful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Live Well, Be Well. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please can I ask one huge favour? If you could subscribe, share and rate this podcast, it would mean an immense amount to me and all the fantastic guests who come on to share their expertise and knowledge with us. It will keep this podcast growing and it will allow us to continue making episodes. Until next week, I hope you all live well and be well.